lieben Rennsportfreunde, einen wunderschönen guten Abend und ein recht herzliches Willkommen. Armani Talk ist wieder da. Schön, dass ihr dabei seid zur 35. Ausgabe. Und ich habe heute zum Armani Talk Gespräch gebeten, zum heutigen Gespräch. Ihr werdet das ja nächste Woche sehen, respektive bis dahin habt ihr es schon gesehen. Mein letzter Gast war der Thomas Karasonis von Markus Zipp und jetzt habe ich den jüngsten Fahrer im gesamten Felde von Racing Fuel Motorsport, den guten Max Mason. Good evening, Max.
Good evening.
First of all, Max, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. And the first question for you would be, how are you and what are your personal goal for the next race in Brands Hatch?
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure to be on here, and I think for me, it's a bit tricky. There's lots of things going about, lots of different opportunities. So for brands, we'll first of all see how everything goes ahead and what happens with that. But I think for some goals is really only to look up. I mean, my Valencia round, it went okay. I mean, we had quite a few issues, and there's with the setup and a few different things, so it was tricky to find the pace. But when I managed to get into the second race, I had a very good start to the race, but we still had a few issues continuing on the longer runs. So I think for brands, it's really to just improve on the package we had at Valencia and really just try find a better operating window for the car to work throughout the races.
The first race was in Valencia not so good for you. How was the problem with the car?
So for the first race, we didn't start because of the crash in qualifying that I had, which was unfortunate. But there's nothing really I could do. I mean, lots of people might have seen it as essentially where one of the cars pulled out from the pit lane right in front of me as I was going through turn one, and I couldn't slow down. There was someone on my bumper behind me, and I couldn't really do much in that situation. So we had a incident at turn one, and that kind of stopped us that kind of ended our Saturday there. But for the second race, we started really strong. There was a lot of incidents. We managed to just get through the issues. Didn't have any problems at the start of the race, but then we had an issue where our pace would really severely drop off towards the last 7 or 8 laps. They would be really tough to maintain the speed that we had. So that was the issue, but it was okay. I managed to finish in 14th or 4th in rookies, which was an okay first race given all the issues that we had throughout the weekend.
Do you missing the crowd in Valencia? Do you miss it when we are saying the Corona situation looks fine? Do you miss it, the crowd with the fans, with the atmosphere?
Well, yeah, I mean, from where I was racing before in Australia, we had you'd have 2 people in the crowd and there would be your parents. So that's the kind of scene of Australian motorsports. It was grassroots level, it was low level. Whereas, it was awesome to come to Valencia and see, I think over the weekend there was something like 20,000 spectators there, which I think is a new record for the Valencia circuit for Euronascar, which is awesome to see. And I think it's amazing to have that environment there where you've got fans through the paddock, you've got fans everywhere watching you, and it makes everything a bit cooler when you realize there's 10, 15,000 people in the grandstands watching you drive.
What is your opinion for the Ricardo Tormo circuit? Is it for you the good circuit for you or not so good for you?
It's difficult to gauge just because of the car that we had. It had quite a few issues with the setup, so it didn't feel amazing to drive. But I mean, a lot of people view negatively towards the circuit, as definitely the drivers. They don't prefer driving there in the NASCAR, but I really enjoyed it. It wasn't, obviously you can tell it's a motorbike track and it has the features that define motorbike tracks, like super grippy tarmac and quite flat curbs, and obviously a lot of runoff, because if you don't have a lot of runoff with motorbikes, it usually doesn't end well. So I mean, I did enjoy it. It's definitely a very modern track compared to what I'm used to in Australia, where it's a lot more rugged, like British tracks. But I really like the circuit. I enjoyed it. It's very flowing. There's not too much. It's not a very stop and start circuit, for instance. Where it has a nice flow to it.
How did you find out about the first race in NASCAR Wheel and Year Series for you, Max?
How did I find out about it, or how did I?
Found out about it.
So my first kind of interaction with how I found out about Euronascar was actually I'm a big fan of Alberto Nascar, who actually met on the weekend, which was awesome. But I had been a big fan of him for about a year before he made his announcement into Euronascar, and I'd seen his testing videos. I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. So I kind of just found it over YouTube. I would watch his videos, and then when he did his announcement, I started watching the videos more and more, and then I actually got an opportunity to do the club challenge in Zolder last year. And that was the kind of first interaction I had with the Euronascar. And from there, I loved the cars. They were super fun to drive. So that's where we kind of set that, if we're going to race a championship in Europe, we're going to do Euronascar.
Are you going to contest on the whole season? Do you already now the Racing Fuel Motorsport are the new racing team on the NASCAR wheel? How was the feel on the Racing Fuel Motorsport, the atmosphere?
Well, for the full season, we're not 100% set yet, just because there's a lot of opportunities that have come up that I can't really go into much detail, but we have opportunities that we're kind of looking at because of my driving that I've done in the past. So we're still up in the air on what's actually going to happen for the rest of the year, and what kind of happens around that. But I mean, it was a nice environment at the team. I already knew lots of the mechanics already I'd worked with them previously at Zolder, so I knew a few, and they're really great to get along with, and we had some good chats, and got along really well with them. So it was a good first weekend. Obviously on track it wasn't ideal, but we had all the mechanics did their best, and they did an amazing job to get the cars sorted with the issues that we had on track.
Who do you think are your idols in motorsport? Do you think for you is the Jensen a sympathical idol for you?
Well, in motorsport, it's weird where I don't really have many people that are like my heroes in motorsport or my idols, because my parents were never in motorsport. I'm like a first generation into motorsport, so for me, it's more where I just like to improve myself rather than just idolizing someone. But I mean, there's a few drivers obviously in Formula One. Everyone has their drivers that they support, so I like Max Verstappen, I like George Russell, those kind of the younger generation of drivers, because obviously they're closer to my age. And then obviously in Euronascar, kind of Alberto Nascar is someone I always followed on YouTube for a long time. So in the Euronascar scene, I definitely he would be one of my favorite drivers.
Do you have so many followers on your Instagram? You have so many podcast episodes. What is for you the plan on your podcasts?
Well, obviously with my Instagram following and my podcast, it kind of just a natural thing to just get out into social media, start creating content, so that either that helps me generate sponsorship income, and for the podcast, it's something fun to do. I like talking with other drivers. Maybe you get the sneaky details, you find something new about the other drivers, find out what they're doing to improve yourself. So that was something I used to kind of help improve myself as well, and learn about other drivers. But it's also something I'm just passionate about, and I enjoy talking to people.
Do you also follow another racing series, which about the Formula One racing series with the American NASCAR or IndyCar or another racing series?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking at other racing series, especially now. I'm not as big of a Formula One fan as I used to be, just because, I mean, it's not the most fun thing to watch. I do really enjoy watching the Cup Series. It's super fun to watch, and I tag along with that. Obviously in Australia, you've got the supercars. I always keep an eye on the results because I know a couple of the drivers, and I know one really well, Jaden Ojeda. He's actually been my coach, and I know him quite well. So I follow all different series. I mean, I'm not really set on one thing. I mean, I went to the World Endurance Championship round here in Portimao because it's about like 20 minutes from my house. So we went there and watched that. So we're kind of just looking at everything. I think I'm a motorsport fan. I like all different cars, and ideally, I'd like to drive one of the cars that I watch one day.
Do you have a favorite track in the Formula One?
Favorite track in Formula One? I don't think I have driven a Formula One track. I've driven one of the old ones, which was Sepang, which I found that was a super cool track. I drove that in an F4 car. But as for the modern circuits, I think one of my favorite ones would be Spielberg, the Austrian Grand Prix. It's a super quick, fun circuit. Yeah, I think Austria would definitely be my favorite circuit on the Formula One
On the
calendar.
historic Grand Prix is Silverstone?
Silverstone is I am actually a big fan of Silverstone circuit. I haven't driven it. It's one of the ones I do want to drive because it's such a cool circuit. It's just a fast old school circuit. But yeah, I think Austria on the current calendar would be definitely my favorite.
In addition to your Australian citizenship, you have a German citizenship. How did that come about? Why do you actually live in Great Britain? You are now in Portugal, but what is for you the situation that is different from the Portugal to Great Britain for you?
Well, obviously the weather is the main difference between England and Portugal. Portugal's a lot more similar to Australia, where it's nice, warm, dry weather compared to England, which is usually rainy and cold. But my German citizenship is actually because my dad, he's German, and I lived there, I think, for about 4 years when I was from 1 year old to about 5. So I still speak a bit of German. I can understand it. I can speak it a little bit. I need to obviously scratch up on it and get it a bit better. But yeah, my German passport's from my dad, who was born in Germany, and I lived there for a couple years.
How much did your life change back then because of the Corona pandemic, Max?
It was it was pretty tricky because it kind of happened right when it happened just before I started racing. So in 2020, obviously everyone went into lockdown and everything. So in Australia, that's when I really got back into motorsport. I mean, I'd always been a fan. I loved Lightning McQueen. He was like my childhood hero. I loved all the Cars movies, and I always like kind of stayed in touch with Formula One. But I had this spell where I just didn't watch any of it from like end of 2016 to the start of 2020, where I just wasn't interested because I liked Nico Rosberg, and when he retired, when Michael Schumacher was already gone, I kind of just stopped watching it. So when I came back in 2020, the biggest shock to me was Daniel Ricciardo at Renault. I thought he was still at Red Bull. That was one big shock. But from there, I really started getting back into Formula One and into motorsport, and I started doing some like hire kart races when Australia opened up, I think December, and I went to Sydney and did a few of those things and actually won a couple of races. But then I really was like, oh, I'm actually half decent at this go-karting stuff. And then I asked my mum, oh, can I do go-karting? And she said, okay. And I don't think then she realized how expensive motorsport was, but that's how the kind of start was. But when we started in March 2021 in go-karting, that went well until about until June. And then we had a massive lockdown again in Australia from June till November. So those kind of 5-ish months that we were locked down again were in those formative, months and even weeks in go-karting I kind of got stopped. And when we came back in November, we did one more go-kart race, and I won 2 of the races and got a second place as well. We were like, okay, this go-karting stuff is great, but can we spend less money in cars? And we kind of had a look, and we're like, yeah, it's possible to spend less money in cars than it is in go-karts. So that's when we kind of made the decision to start moving over to cars. And that's when I had my first session in a car, which was at Mount Panorama in a Radical.
When was the first time you drove in a bicycle, and when did you say to yourself that I wanted to be a professional racing driver?
Well, I actually learned to ride my bike super early. I think it was something crazy, like 3 or something, super, super young. I remember I always used to ride my bike up and down the driveway of my great grandmother's house, and she always used to watch me ride my bike. So I always loved to ride my bike. I used to do it every day, and ever from I think 4 or 5 years old, I had no training wheels. I was just riding the bike by itself, and I think that's something I always did. I still ride my bike basically every day today, and not, I think, crazy like a racing bike, just a mountain bike. I go ride around with my brother and sister, and that's just something I enjoy doing. And for racing driver, it's weird because it happens so much later. I think as soon as I got in a go-kart, I realized how hard it was going to be. But when I showed up to my first race and I got a podium in my first race, I kind of said, I want to be a professional racing driver. I said, it's possible. I've put the work in. I've got my result here. And I said, that's going to be my goal for my life.
Do you often go to the gym? And if so, how often do you go there?
I go basically every day. That's one thing that's for racing that's very important. So I train cardio every 2 days, and I train fitness every 2 days. So it alternates between cardio, strength, cardio, strength, cardio, strength. And I'll take an odd day off if I'm feeling a bit sore, but otherwise I'm basically every day in the gym, improving my physical performance.
At the age of 16, you are this year on the 17, you are one of the youngest in the racing series. Are you afraid of not living up to your personal expectations?
A little bit. Obviously, my expectations are always going to be very high, and no matter what results I get, my expectations will still remain the same. But my personal expectations is for me to perform at my best. And I also expect everyone else to perform at their best, because if I put all the effort and no one else does, I don't view that as very fair. So, for everything I prepare, I make sure that every race I show up to, I'm operating at 100% every single lap, everywhere I go. I'm not getting out of the car tired. I'm fit and ready to race a car for as long as I need to. And I think, obviously, being the youngest driver, it's a weird mixture between everyone expects you to be so fast, and then also everyone expects you to be inexperienced and have issues. But for me, I want to operate like I'm a Formula One world champion. So that's what my expectation is for me to be as fit as a Formula One driver and to operate at the same level as one.
How would you describe Max yourself as a driver?
I'm not sure. A lot of people call me crazy, especially back in Australia, because I was so young, and especially as young drivers, we take a lot more risks and we do a lot of things that people don't think is possible. But I would say there's a lot of hot-headed drivers. I wouldn't view myself as hot-headed, but I always strive for excellence. I'm always looking for something to improve my lap times, improve my performance, how to go faster, and that. I think just someone that's always looking to improve.
What will you recommend to any young driver who wants to be a racing driver, or what you say, just live your dream?
I think to a young racing drivers and people that are older getting into racing is one thing. It's you're never too old. You very quickly will find yourself being too young for things. So I would say is to just try your best. Never accept being last. Always push to be first. And just believe in yourself. Have confidence in your own ability.
How often are you active on social media, and which platform do you prefer more for you?
Well, obviously, my main social media is Instagram, and my mum helps me with that. She's a lot more media-minded than I am. I'm equivalent to an old man when it comes to social media. I'm not very good at it at all, but I improve it every day to get better and better at it. But my main platform is Instagram. I mean, I'm active on it every day. I post every few days when there's something important to post about. Obviously, every week with my podcast, I post on there. I also have a news site that we're launching soon that I'm using just to write my own stories about motorsport from Formula One to just grassroots level, and motorbikes, everything in between. Just to, you kind of just build media and just use that to your own advantage. But my most preferred social media, I'd say, is Instagram. I use that the most, and I know how it operates the best.
Is it for you the plan on the next years, on the future, on the own website?
I mean, I think I already have I'm pretty sure my website is still up, but that's just about me. And I think for my goal for the next few years when it comes to social media is, to have my own news site that basically is operating and generating income for me, so I can continue racing and just improving, increasing all my social medias, maybe even going onto YouTube and starting that and all that kind of stuff to really just increase my social platform.
You are only the second Australian to compete in the NASCAR wheel. Do you feel a little pressure, or how do you deal with it?
Obviously, there's a bit of pressure, but I think because it's been such a long time since there was an Australian driver in the championship, everyone kind of a lot of people think I'm just the first, which obviously builds some pressure, but also gets rid of some. But I view myself as just the same as everyone. If you're German, English, Australian, Japanese, whoever you are, you're still competing. And once the helmet's on, you have the country flag on the side of your car, but everyone's racing for the same goal, which is to win, which is also mine. So that's every race I show up in a condition where I'm ready to win a race.
Do you ever get homesick for your home country of Australia?
Not really. I mean, I've been gone now for, I think, around 10 months from Australia. And obviously you miss a few things from Australia, and obviously my friends as well are all still there. But I think I've adjusted to Europe well. I mean, I used to live here in Europe for most of, half of my life, essentially. So I'm just as European as I am Australian.
Will your parents accompany you in the NASCAR real first season for you? Do you support this in this first race in Valencia?
Yes, they were both there, my mum and my dad, and obviously they have to be there at each race because I'm under 18. They have to sign me on for the race weekends. So obviously I have to have a parent or a guardian there. So yeah, for the races that I'll be doing in Euronascar, my parents will both be there. Yeah.
I assume your goal for the next few years is to get into the Euronascar Pro. I assume correct?
I mean, it depends how everything happens. Obviously, we've got a few things happening on the side as well. Everything kind of it's racing. Everything happens so quick, as you probably know, and you've spoken to a lot of people how things change overnight in motorsport. So we'll have to see how everything goes. And obviously it depends on funding and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, maybe it is a goal. Maybe I'm in America. Maybe I'm back in Australia. Who knows? Anything can happen in motorsport.
What is your favorite food? Is it something typically Australian or in your home country of Great Britain where you live now, or is it different for you?
It depends really wherever you are. I mean, in Australia, there's nothing really that's typically Australian. You'd have like a sausage sanger, like a sausage roll, but like it's like in a piece of bread with onion. That's pretty nice. But I would say my favorite food is probably sausage pasta, which is obviously Italian. I do love Italian food. And I mean, if I'm in Germany, then currywurst or brezel. I do love a good butter brezel. They're very nice. You have those on the way to the airport. Yeah, bratwurst as well. That's, I mean, in Germany, you only eat German things because it's also good there. In Portugal, there's loads of nice things here as well. So, yeah, I mean, it just depends wherever I am. If I'm Australian, you eat more typically Australian things. But in Australia, there's nothing really, like Australia is just a country that's filled with people from other countries. So it's very multicultural. There's Chinese food, Indian food, there's Italian, there's Greek, there's just everything you can imagine is in Australia.
What else would you have done if you were not a racing driver?
Not too sure. I'm a big enjoyer of history. So maybe something towards being a teacher towards history or something that interests me. But I mean, the only real thing that I've ever been set on in my life to become professional at is a racing driver. I mean, I was kind of just floating about from about 13, 14 years old. I didn't really know what I wanted to really focus on. And then I found motorsport, and that's been my kind of focus for the past 3-ish years.
That was correct. What would you like to read about yourself in the next few years, Max, if you read a satirical article?
I would like to read, or like my ideal is to read everything my goal is in my life right now. I would like to read that on an article in the next few years. I think, I'm so young, but I still want to just progress as quickly as possible through motorsport to reach to the top. I think obviously towards in the stock car route, my goal from Euronascar is to reach the Cup Series in America, or something endurance related, reaching the top strings of motorsport like Formula One, World Endurance Championship, and Cup Series would be my kind of main goals in the future. To read about any of those three, I'd be happy with.
Do you also follow football, and if so, which football club do you follow and support you? And another question for you is, do you think about Jude Bellingham? The situation of Dortmund, he's the second place on the Bundesliga. Do you think he say goodbye on Germany? He plays to be on the Real Madrid, or do you think another club he's make a deal with Jude?
Yeah. Also, well, for football, I used to play it at a high level in Australia. I was a goalkeeper, and so I was always kind of interested in it. And in Australia, I follow the Mariners, so they're the team, and I think they're going to the grand final now as well, which is awesome. In the Premier League, my brother is like the biggest Brighton Hove Albion fan, and I just follow along as well because we lived there for quite a while in England. And for the Bundesliga, for Jude, I think best move for him is to stay with Dortmund for one more year, and if they don't win the Bundesliga, then I think he should go to, I think, the Premier League. I don't think the La Liga is the best place for a lot of players right now, just because of everything that's going on there. There's a lot of financial issues with some of the bigger clubs. So I think the Premier League is definitely, if you're looking to go somewhere where it's going to be really tough to perform and you want to show how good you are, is the Premier League is definitely the place to go.
Which football club do you think is for Jude the better option in England?
I think for Jude, I would say Manchester City would be one of them. I think he would suit that club well. Obviously, I'd say Brighton because he would be a pretty good upgrade in the midfield if any of the midfielders, like if McAllister, for instance, leaves. I think bringing him in wouldn't be a bad choice. And obviously, Brighton now heading to Europa League for the first time in 120 years. I think they're definitely on a rise towards competing for Champions League and Europa League each season. I think, just any of the top 6 teams, I would say, in the Premier League would be an ideal move for him compared to going to La Liga, where it's, I don't think it's the best choice. I would say Bundesliga or Premier League are the 2 best choices for Jude.
My last question for you is about the soccer. The English soccer is so many good results on the Champions League. Do you think Manchester City won the Champions League, or do you think Inter Milano wins the Champions League?
I think this year Man City's going to win it. Their team this year has just been so complete, especially in the Champions League. They've really showed what they're worth, and with Haaland in front, you know, he can score from wherever he wants to. So I think Man City's definitely going to win. I mean, maybe I'm wrong with Inter, but we'll see.
What was good? You tip?
Pardon?
You tip the result on the Champions League final?
I would say it's going to be a 3-0 victory to Man City.
Okay, alright. Max, thank you so much. Das war's, das große Gespräch mit Max Mason. Thank you so much, Max, for your time. And
it's
I wish you
been a
good
pleasure.
luck for your rest on the season, on the NASCAR wheel. And I hope we will see on maybe a soda in October. We will see.
Yep,
and
we'll see.
When we sing drinking our espresso or cappuccino, you can just say what's your choice for your drink.
A nice sparkling water, I think, is enough. Enough of it.
This was ideal. Thank you so much, Max. Thank you.
Thank you.